Hello, I'm Greta Bucher, daughter of Sarah Wenger-Schenk. Cousins Jason Good, Hannah Johnson, and I will be reading a montage of voices from Grandpa Wenger's 16 grandchildren, each of whom we will name as we read. Our ages range from Mia, 11 years old, to Chad, 49 years old. So here's our bouquet of tributes to the grandpa we dearly loved. Grandpa truly was like a tree, planted by streams of water that brings forth fruit in its season, whose leaves do not wither, and so many of the things that he did prospered. His faith and love are a shelter under which so many other trees took root and flourished. I have been blessed to grow up within this family. From Bart Johnson, I love Grandpa's ability to be dynamic. Despite his being an old man for my entire life, he remained able to adapt to changing times and circumstances. Despite being the patriarch of a large tribe, he was able to relinquish his executive command with grace and humility as it became appropriate. In his final chapters, he became a gentle, patient caregiver for his wife. And when his health in turn declined, he was able to accept this role himself. From Deborah Good, my favorite memories of Grandpa are of him in the ocean, so comfortable in the waves as he bobbed alongside family members and then jumped at the perfect moment to catch a ride into shore. He was body surfing well into his 90s, and was hard to miss with his pure white hair, stunning farmer's tan, and the large heart surgery scar running down his chest. There were moments that one of his daughters would call out from their chair on the beach, "Where's Dad?" Only to discover he was floating in the salt water, as he loved to do and taught so many of us to mimic, face up with a slight arch to his back, arms extended out to the sides, his cheeks, chest, arms, and toes just barely breaking the ocean's surface. From Matt Showalter, Grandpa always cared. I felt safe and welcome whenever we came to visit him and Grandma. I remember the time I called him up for an interview. He would have been around 90 years old, and I was working on a paper for a master's program. We spent an hour on the phone while I peppered him with questions about his ministry in Ethiopia. He talked about people, events, and dates from decades ago as if they happened yesterday. Then he wanted to know what I was up to. How was my family? How were my studies going? What were my plans after I finished? By the end of the call, I felt like I was the one who was being interviewed. Grandpa always cared. From Yuji Wenger. My favorite thing about Grandpa was his peach milkshakes and cheese curls. When we lived in the house next door, we would get an invitation to come over, and I was so excited because his milkshakes were so good. My mom tried to recreate it the day he died, but it wasn't quite the same. I will miss Grandpa and Grandma's hospitality and kindness.
Hello, I'm Jason Good, son of Betty Goodwhite. Here's some words I wrote for Grandpa. Grandpa brought people together. His authenticity, humility, and empathy created a space where people felt welcomed and at home with him regardless of their background. He was able to balance his strong commitment to his beliefs with a genuine openness to change as he listened and learned from others. In the end, Grandpa loved those around him, loved living life, and pushed us all to be better people. Here are words from Regina Wenger. I love that Grandpa possessed a deep devotion to Scripture and prayer. He showed a reverence for the authority of the Bible that did not fall into legalism. And I was acutely aware that he and Grandma prayed for me every day. Throughout my life, I always knew how much Grandpa loved Grandma. The song, "Drink to Me Only with Thine Eyes," that he played to her on the mouth harp, was expressed on his face anytime he'd look at her. Grandpa told stories, not the fantastical time, but the ones that kept the oral tradition of the faith and family before me in ways that shaped my identity. My faith, interest in history, and belief in the compatibility of the church and the academy owe a great deal to the family culture Grandpa and Grandma cultivated. Here are words from Mia Wenger. I always loved Grandpa when he worked outside. I loved it when he gardened and when he harvested the grapes and figs. It was nice hearing him whistle while he worked, and I always knew where he was. I will always remember him, especially when I eat figs from the bush he planted. And now from Timothy Kennelshank. Grandpa whistled hymns while he worked. It was like the soundtrack to his life. I remember helping him in the vineyard years ago and having a conversation about faith. Faith was his motivation to reach out and care for people. He and Grandma prayed and found the wisdom to reject the teachings that kept people on the margins because of sexuality or gender. Love was more important than sticking to all the dogmas they had been taught. Their church was like their second family, and it seemed their inner circle was always expanding. Grandpa loved the verse in Philippians 4:8, which I quote in his memory. Finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. And now some words from Chad Showalter. As a child, I always loved going to Grandpa and Grandma's house. Grandpa consistently spent time with me. When I was about 7, I was fascinated by a box trap he had built to catch squirrels and other threats to his garden. When I went back to Ohio, he gifted me with a trap he had built for me. It was also Grandpa who first taught me to shoot a gun when I was 8. In the years since, Grandpa has been kind to me in many ways and consistently taken interest in who I was becoming. He gave generously toward my college tuition. He spent hours with me, talking as we cut grapes together when I was around during the summer as a young adult. In his 90s, he loved spending time with my children when we were able to be together.
Hi, I'm Hannah Johnson, daughter of Margaret Wanger Johnson. Grandpa and I shared a love of music. Since my earliest memories, Grandpa enjoyed singing hymns around the piano. And his love of music goes way back to when he was a little boy figuring out songs on the mouth harp. During my last visit with Grandpa, as we swapped harmonica songs for fiddle tunes, he shared a story from his youth. When little Chester was 3 years old, a church leader came to their home in Chesapeake, Virginia, and told his mother, an accomplished piano player, that the church found musical instruments to be sinful and she must get rid of her piano. Chester was concerned, and after this man left, he asked his mother if he would have to get rid of his harmonica. She replied, "Ach, that's just a plaything." And from Rhoda, Grandpa instilled in me a love for the Bible, the very words of God. I wear a special set of jewelry I bought with the money he gifted to any one of his children or grandchildren who read the message. I wear the red garnets to remind me of the Lamb who was slain. And from Joe Shank, when I think of Grandpa, I think of the stories he'd tell us about his childhood and Ethiopia. I remember his cheerful whistling in the vineyard and his harmonica playing. I'm grateful for the help he gave with tuition and especially for the value he placed in higher education for his family. That's a core value that endures. I remember how he'd squeeze my biceps as a kid and tell me that this year I'm as strong as a turkey vulture. And then the next year, I was as strong as a young bobcat. Progress was made. He was always a powerful figure in our lives, and I loved him very much. And from Ryan Good, one of the things I find remarkable about Grandpa's life is the way he held together, on the one hand, an abiding love for the church and a conservative faith, and on the other, an incredible willingness to grow and change. He was a man of deep conviction who held the line and expected much, especially from those closest to him. And he was also a man who allowed his heart to draw his mind open towards new ways of thinking. The capacity to stretch in this way is both rare and significant. At a time when the views of conservative and progressive cannot be more at odds, I am grateful for what I learned from Grandpa of the value of pulling these poles together in faith, church, and family. And from Emmy Wanger, my favorite thing about Grandpa was that he always told good stories, whether it was from his times in Ethiopia, from the Bible, or stories with Grandma. They were always interesting and fun to listen to. I also loved his passion for birds. We always had a bird feeder right in front of the window, and sometimes when a bird came to the feeder, he would tell us all about it. And finally, from Charlotte Boudreau, Grandpa was an impressive figure to me, in stature, presence, and accomplishments. As a child, I saw him as a gentle giant. As I grew up, I became more aware of the high regard that so many people in the Mennonite church and beyond held for him. But at the end of the day, the memories I hold most dear have to do simply with him being my grandpa. The sharp smell of fresh grapes in the walk-in refrigerator. The sight of him triumphantly coming out of the ocean after a successful body surf. The comforting sound of his whistled tunes drifting in from outside. The buttery, salty taste of the corn on the cob he skillfully roasted, and the tender kiss on the cheek he often gave when we said our goodbyes.